Welcome to Planning and Beyond, the podcast where financial planning meets human understanding. I'm your host, Ashley Kwame, and I'm already laughing. And we are like only 20 seconds into the recording right now. And the reason I'm laughing, we're going to make it. The reason I'm laughing is because, in case you can't hear, I have my friend, colleague, and new collaboration partner, Meg Lertz, here with me. And she and I like to have a good time. But we also like to talk about cool things, relevant things that apply to financial advisors. And so that's exactly what we're going to be doing here today. This is the first episode. If you've been listening for a little while, I mentioned that part of season 2 would be introducing what I'm calling the how to series. I know that's very clever, super clever, right? And so how to ... whatever it is, right? That kind of then comes there after that, right? And so taking on just questions that either I've had from advisors or just observed, practical implementation, strategies, skills, something that both Meg and I are actually really passionate about. And so I wanted to bring her on today as the first of the first for this how-to series. But before we get into the how-to ... First, we're going to talk a little bit about this new collaboration. If you follow both of us on social media, maybe you've heard the word on the street in that Meg and I are collaborating now, showing up in each other's work. And we're going to take just kind of a few moments to explain and talk just a little bit about that. What does it mean? What does it look like? And then we'll get into how that's relevant to the how-to series that we're going to be talking about today. Meg, I have been talking for way too long as you've been sitting there laughing, and I'm trying not to laugh looking at you laughing. Welcome. Thank you for coming on, humoring me on this. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing happy to be here as well.
Awesome. Well, listen, you and I have been chatting all things collaboration. And so maybe let's just kind of start. I know we've put out things just on social media and in, newsletters and just kind of like announcing it. But I thought it might be nice to just talk through like, what is this collaboration? What are we doing? I'm going to let you go first. Meg, what are we doing?
It's a good question. Outside of just having a good time.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's fair to say we should probably just acknowledge the fact that I do a lot of things. Like, it is part of my process, if you will, to collaborate on different things. And some of the stuff that we are collaborating on as it pertains to Beyond the Plan and also with Less Lonely Money, we're working with individuals, so if you've got clients that want to talk, we're working with them. We're working with advisors. We are working with firms, and all with the goal of bringing the psychology of financial planning, behavioral finance, financial therapy, into practices. It is, I can remember 10 years ago, like being at a conference. And A, I'm the only psychology person. B, somebody asked me if I would get coffee because they thought that I worked there and that I wasn't there to speak. And then when I talked to this particular person, I said, yeah, I'm going to be talking about psychology. And they're like, I'm not sure that I believe in that. And I was like, cool, we will probably not be friends, but, I'm here. This is
okay.
So it's going. Flash forward 10 years. People are much more open and accepting and excited, about what this means. And there's so many pieces. I know that you're working on an article. I write a lot. It can mean so many things, financial psychology, and the different firms that we work with, the different people that we work with, the different advisors that we work with. They are all manifesting what that might be for them. When you get into the individual level, everything is a little bit different each time. And so even though there may be some rules of the road in terms of you're working with humans and humans kind of work in a particular way, there's still the way that you want to do it, the way that it's going to come out with your clients, how open your firm is or not to things like financial therapy. And this is not a good or a bad thing. I think maybe for some firms it works really well, and for Other firms, it may not make as much sense. And so I am super attracted to what we are doing, super excited about what we are doing in just the sheer number of creative projects, creative ideas, coming in from clients, advisors, different firms, like what they want to do. It's just exciting. Like it's honestly like my creative happiness is in that sort of chaos of there are things that we know, there are things that you want to do. What does it look like, to attempt to put those things together and to work with you, who maybe people don't know. We've been friends for a long time and have never necessarily collaborated. We've collaborated in the sense that like we call each other and talk, but not like a formal collaboration. And so to work with you, who I consider to be one of the brilliant minds in this space, I'm super, super grateful.
Yeah. Samesies.
That's nice. Thanks.
That's nice.
Ditto.
Ditto. I sound so smart right now. You said all of these really wonderful, like brilliant, like things. And then my response is like samesies. Yeah. So let me just follow up that really fantastic compliment that you just gave me about being a quote unquote, like brilliant mind with samesies. And there you go, folks. Yeah. So this collaboration, I am, I have to contain my excitement, similar to, kind of what you've shared. It's been a long heart desire of mine to collaborate and work on cool stuff in this space. And, part of collaborating too, and I would imagine this resonates with some advisors out there maybe listening, doing things alone sometimes it kind of stinks,
dude.
and yeah, like creating something alone, like it's cool for a while until it's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, coming into now, it's kind of hard to believe, 3 years since I really started a hard pivot, 2 years since I launched the fractional offering of working inside of firms as a behavioral officer. That feels a little crazy to kind of say. It's kind of reached a point where it's like, okay, like, I can only do so much by myself. And if it's going to grow, which I passionately believe like in the work that both you and I are doing and bringing it to firms, and not just the big firms that can afford it, but to, all firms that want it, right? I knew, at least for me, like I can't do it alone.
Content related to that, like that is, whether it's from university, whether it's from working at the Kids' platform, people at Shaping Wealth, like one of the places that a place that has always helped me in deciding where am I going to go next is who believes in that philosophy of education is for all. And everywhere I have worked believes in that. And so the sheer amount of content that you put out, that I put out, that I've put out with other firms that I've worked with in the past, it is all related to that idea that this is not just for somebody that can afford it. Like this is for anybody and everybody who's willing to try it.
Yeah, exactly. So, as far as kind of the collaboration piece, to go back to some of what you shared, we've been talking about this at really 3 different levels. There's the client support level, there is the advisor support, and then there's the firm support. And what's amazing, like when I have stepped back, is you and I have natural strengths, like zones of genius, and a lot of it overlaps, which is great. It's fantastic. The ways, though, the parts that don't overlap, they complement each other just so nicely that, for me, it's kind of if I think that a fractional chief behavioral officer, or bringing even not just like that offering or that role, but just if bringing financial psychology, behavioral finance, financial therapy to firms, like what is that? Where does it fit in? And it is on the client level, it's on the advisor level, and it is on the firm level. Like I wholeheartedly believe, that that is the integrated approach, right? And so you and I just complement each other in our zones of genius and our overlap where we do overlap. It's just very nice and it works together. And so it's like a no-brainer, like in thinking about like, who would I work with to kind of do this role? Like, you have always been like top of mind. There, it's a short list, and you being top of mind. And so, I'm grateful. I'm excited, as I know you are, to be, collaborating, working together, not just in Beyond the Plan, but also in all of the fantastic content that you've built out within Less Lonely Money, which is just a fantastic resource. If you're listening to this and you're not familiar with Meg's Substack, Less Lonely Money, you should immediately pause. Actually, wait, how long are we into the download? Actually, can you wait until like the 20-minute mark into the download and then pause and go subscribe to Meg's? I think it helps my stats. I'm not sure. That's like what I've heard. Fair, yeah. Slightly kidding, but you should go and subscribe to it. And there is a free version, there's a paid version, and Meg puts out just the most brilliant, like practical, down to earth tools there. What else do you want to say about Less Lonely Money? Maybe before we kind of shit, that kind of stole your spotlight there talking about it. Sorry about that.
Well, it's okay. I'm sometimes not talking about myself. Less Lonely Money, if you've maybe followed my articles on the past on the Kids platform, or if you followed my work at Shaping Wealth, this Substack has been kind of an interesting thing in that it's very personal. So the articles are long, like they are on the Kids platform. It's only because, I don't know, writing so many of those for so many years, I can't seem to write short things. But it's personal. I talk a lot about my own life, my own thoughts and ideas. No article is really the same. It doesn't necessarily have a same structure, but it's all around thinking about your money, feeling your feelings about your money, just different stuff that comes up related to emotions, philosophy, psychology. It's all kind of baked in there, and it's been really, really fun to do that. And so if you enjoy that and you want 4,000 words in your inbox once a month, then go sign up for the free version. The paid version, if anybody is wondering, is definitely more for financial advisors. It has a client-facing newsletter in it if you want a newsletter written by myself. And it has, in relation to that newsletter, like a 30-minute meeting guide. So it's got some questions related to those topics. The thought being, you send this newsletter, some random client says, "Hey, I read that newsletter and I was thinking," and now you think, "Come on in. I've got some stuff to ask you. We can have a little meeting about this." So it does work together, and those are always based off of the bigger post that went out earlier that month. So it's all connected. And hopefully Ashley and I will be doing a little bit more. There's a LinkedIn series that is strangely popular called Ask and Understand.
Strangely popular. This is where you are so you are so humble. It is brilliant. And the thing that I try to send to Clayton all the time, yeah, it is fantastic. You should go and subscribe, not just to the free version, but you should do the paid version, because as an advisor, there's some good stuff in there. Yeah. And I don't just say that. I mean, I am biased, obviously, but it is also good. And so, we will be doing more and more stuff kind of within each other's spaces and working together. And it's all exciting. And here is where it comes together as far as what we are doing here today. So I mentioned earlier that, part of season 2 is doing a how-to series. And, Meg and I just kind of walked through a little bit about what we're doing together, some of the work, like what that looks like. And there is this, kind of overarching almost theme to it of how to do this better, how to show up better, how to do, whether it is how communicate about estate planning or legacy planning with your clients, how to do that better, how to just ask better questions, which is what we're going to be talking about actually today, how to ask about a client's money history. And so with that, we're going to go and we're going to dive in. You'll hear Meg and I just kind of go off.
Ramble.
Yeah. I feel like I had to kind of say that, I feel like kids used to say go off. I don't know. I kind of had to, all right, maybe not. Okay. We're going to do that. We're going to go off and talk really about how, as an advisor, so keep in mind, as an advisor, that's the distinction here, is how, as an advisor, can you, even should you? You know how I feel about the word should. It is judgmental, and we might get a little judgmental, but how should you be asking about a client's money history? So, Meg, before we get so excited and passionate about like the how, let's maybe just kind of start like I want to know just kind of when you think about a client's like money history, let's put like just some definition maybe kind of to that. Like what comes to mind for you like when thinking about a client's money history? Like what is that?
So I think, actually, I know similarly to you, think in pretty broad, like decades. Like there's like I'm 41. So, you could ask me about my fees. You could ask me about my 20s. Please don't. You could ask me about my teens. And, you could probably even ask like younger than that. But when we think about money history, there is that. I can also say that when I was in school at Kansas State, one of the coolest projects I ever did, which was probably like the project that made me fall completely in love with financial therapy and just how interesting it is. It was Christy Archuleta's class at the time, Dr. Christy Archuleta, and it's called Money and Relationships. And part of her class, we were supposed to go interview like our mom and our grandparents or our aunts or our great aunts. Like it was all ladies that I did. You're supposed to just like talk to people in your family about money. And so there's even within money history, there's like generational history too. So there's my life history, but then there's family history, which could and does pull in some very interesting things. So it's a very big space. It's not just like one decade, or it's a big area.
I had a client one time, an advisor client ask me, like, does a client, when we say like money history, is that like, do we mean childhood? And I thought it was interesting because I guess I had not thought about it maybe from that place. And so when I think about money history, like I will say, like, it's money history is literally everything before today. Like that is it. And so it does not have to be childhood. It is and can also include those generations, like the relationships, there. It does include that. And it also, when you ask about it, like money history, maybe if you just think about it as everything before today. And so, I think for some advisors, and this, there's the like, I don't want to play therapist and like, I don't want to go back like into their childhood because I don't, or there are some advisors that are like, yeah, let's go back. Like, let me like kind of understand that. But if you're maybe not quite as comfortable, but recognize like having some historical context might be helpful. Maybe just thinking about money history is like everything before today. It could be just the last 10 years of like their adult life, like for you, right? Being 41. Hey, tell me about just like the last 10 years, like what's been going on, like money wise. I've had some advisors that have tiptoed back in there and they're like, oh gosh, I didn't even know that you went bankrupt 10 years ago. And it's like, hey, that's kind of helpful information to know and to have. That's history. I don't know your thoughts on that, but I do
want to ask you a question about that. I guess I want to clarify why asking about history is important. Because so much of financial planning is just about going forward. We are meeting you where you're at today. So I could probably, if you forced me to, make an argument that says you don't even need to know that stuff. You're just like where you're with them today. Yeah, all the historical stuff like came into that, but we are moving forward. So maybe we don't need to do that. So I think it's probably fair that we take a second and just clarify, like, why is that important? Or why would that be important that we would know about history?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like financial planning reminds me a lot of like solution focused therapy, right? Coaching, right? Where it's like a present and forward, engagement, relationship with the clients. Like it reminds me a lot of that. Here is where history can be helpful and important. When a client is stuck, when there are difficulties around behaviorally taking action, uh, when there are maybe emotional reactions that seem out of proportion. Sometimes knowing a little bit of like that history piece can be helpful. Me, I act like you were there. I wish you were there. This would have been cool if you were there. Talking with a client, and we're talking about just some goals and like kind of values, and we were talking, and I forget exactly like kind of what I said, but something kind of made me go, this seems really important. They're saying the same words like over and over and kind of in the same way. And so like I'm getting the sense that there's something driving that, and it'd be helpful to maybe understand a little bit more about that as the planners in the situation are working on crafting like the plan. And so, I just kind of asked like, hey, like this seems really important. And I've heard, and I reflected actually really just kind of what I said there. Like, would you mind sharing with me a little bit more about why this particular thing, and I won't name it just from a sense of, confidentiality here, but can you tell me a little bit more about why this thing is so like important to you? Like, can you share with me a little bit? And they went into actually history all on their own. Like, I didn't actually directly ask. Where that was helpful, though, is from a place of planning out goals for this client in particular, looking at the next 5 years as they were in that retirement place. It helped like the planner in that situation know, okay, I think we kind of should maybe prioritize maybe this thing. And maybe if we do both, like one or the other, it's really not that big of a deal. But like my recommendation is that we would prioritize, B over here. But the client, I'm getting the sense now after hearing some of that history and like how big that is emotionally, like, okay, it's become clear that, we actually need to go with focusing on, priority thing A over here. So I say that just because I think that history can inform some of the planning recommendations and help get clients unstuck. What about for you? Why do you, from your lens and working with advisors, where do you see history, knowing a client's money history, playing a role in helping advisors maybe do the work that they do?
I do. So I do think that there is an interesting thing that comes with the stuck part. I think maybe we'll get to this later, but I want to make sure that to me, this brings up like an aspect of timing. Like when you ask about, because this came up naturally in your conversation with this client. And when you were saying client, you actually meant a financial planning client, not an advisor.
Correct. Yes, exactly.
And, so this person's talking, but they're not upset. Maybe they don't even necessarily think they're stuck. They're just kind of talking about what needs to happen. They keep using the same words. You and your training have picked up on this. And now we can help craft like, well, it could have been, taking the fork this way or that way. And we went this way. So in some ways, maybe we even avoided getting stuck. I think that for financial advisors, I just want to be careful with this idea of stuck, because we don't want advisors to be like, oh, well, my client clearly has like some issue that they're not working through. And so now I need to go dig into their history to find out what in the H is wrong with them so that we can get past this. And so there is a natural way to bring up histories, and it's maybe unfair to say a natural way, because that just seems like something
you should know
how to do, which it's hard to do unless you've thought about it and been trained. But in the same way that Ashley mentioned, like, she's hearing the same thing again and again. Maybe they're saying the same word again and again. Maybe it has been 2 or 3 times that they've come in to talk about selling the family house or something, and they're not able to move forward. Then it can be like totally appropriate and fine to just say, let's like zoom out for a second. Let's talk about this from like a different perspective, that, clearly this is not just a money decision. Let's talk about some of the other things that are going on that are driving some of this. Totally good. But I just want to be careful that we're not on the lookout for, oh, my client's stuck. Something probably happened to them when they were young. And I will even use myself as an example. So thanks a lot, Dr. Christy Archuleta. But
I hate Christy. Just kidding. Love her.
When I was taking that class, I interviewed a bunch of people in my family, and come to find out, one of the themes and I've talked about this a lot, so I apologize if you've heard this on some other episode, but like one of the themes that came out was all the women in my family, like back to my great grandmother, had to like hide money. My great grandfather was a drunk. My great grandmother had to hide the money so that she could feed her kids. Flash forward to my grandmother. My grandfather was not the best. He left my grandmother. She had to sell some of her stuff in order to take care of her 5 kids. Flash forward to my mother. My father is a wonderful man. Her first husband, not a great man. But even through the divorce with my dad, it's like still, you have to be able to take care of, in my mom's case, 4 kids. And so growing up in my household, it was always a theme that got said to me, different from what got said to my brothers, that you need to have money to take care of yourself, which on the surface is like fine, like yay, women empowerment, sure, like have your own dollars. But this was like a warning. And so now flash forward to me in my late 20s, dating my now husband. We decided to buy a house together before our apartment in San Diego cost as much as a freaking house. And I remember, my husband says that he doesn't remember this, but like we were in the kitchen of our like 700 square foot apartment. And he goes, so I guess we should like combine bank accounts. And I remember being so angry. And I said to him, I will never share a bank account with you. You will never control my money ever. Like you need to know that right now. And at the time, this was like before grad school, like maybe only a year or two later, because I remember being in my new apartment that I owned with my husband, taking Christy's class, that like I put those two things together like that, like the reason I did not know where that came from. Like in the moment, I was just so angry that he thought that he could control me, with
how
like,
dare you?
Money. How dare you? And I did not fully understand like where that rage and fear came from so instantaneously until discovering this about my family history. And so there can be stuff like that where you're just like, I'm not sure where this comes from. And then you realize something and it's there. I don't expect financial advisors to, I mean, if you want to, call up Christy and she'll tell you how to do it. But like, I don't expect you to like send
Christy, we are so sorry.
Students or your clients, on a message path to like go interview their grandparents. But like you could, I guess. But there are things, I mean, I even think about, I said not to ask about my 20s. Like, man, in my 20s, I had a good old time, but probably not the most financially responsible time. Like, note that I also had this fear of like not having my own money. So that was traumatic. So then finally having a real job and finally starting to work with my own financial advisor, I was, as much as I knew about money, I was really ashamed about like the situation and stuff that I was in. And even to this day, my financial advisor, he thinks it's very funny that my husband and I do not share a bank account. He knows that story. And so he accepts it. He's probably the only one at any given time that can see all of our accounts because my husband's and I's are separate.
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
It's just one of those, like, I have to know that at any given time I can like cut and run to Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, or you can just come here to Augusta. Like, that'd be cool. Fair. Yeah.
I don't know if Clayton would like that. I feel like he would make me go back.
I think Clayton would probably, I don't know what he would do, actually.
Maybe he would say, I'm going to go live with Justin.
He might actually, that actually probably would be, he'd be like, yeah, y'all can have the house. I'll just go. Which is all I actually care about. Okay, joking. Well, okay, so we're talking about timing though, Meg. And like, you're talking about kind of like when. All right, but like, when should we not be asking about money history, right? Because if the flip side is like, hey, maybe here's like somewhere, like, yes, timing is important, and there are certain times maybe, right, that it can be helpful, or certain moments, and it's not all or nothing, right? It's not only, as you were saying, which I'm glad you pointed out, it's not every time like a client is stuck that we should be going into that. But contrast to that,
only when they're stuck, like you can
sure.
That, like Neil Page, if I've learned one thing from Neil Page the Great, working at Shaping Wealth, is that humans are time travelers. I love it when he talks about it in his British accent. It's
Oh
great.
yeah.
But he's so, that is the one thing that's super cool about being human, is that at any time you can go back and you can go forward. And so if someone is talking and they're really excited about whatever, like ask them where that came from. Like it's at any time, it is okay to ask a question that pulls in something from the past.
It is
say
one of my favorite go-tos, not just like with clients or like when I was doing therapy, even like with like my kids. With Clayton, I tend to actually tell him where it comes from, and that doesn't actually do me really well. But that is one of my favorite go-tos is, something happens, a client says something, does right, and I will go, like, well, where does that come from? Just very genuine, like kind of can be like, oh, that's a big statement. Like, wow, that's a really powerful kind of thing. Positively, negatively, like whatever, right? It might be, but like, where does that come from? And I think like kind of saying that way can show genuine like curiosity. And it's a way of like asking about money history without asking about, saying like, let me ask about your money history, there. But if we're thinking about like, hey, when should we not be asking about money history? Because I do think that, and you and I have talked about this, like, I do think that there are some moments or even parts or places within the planning process that like it may not be so great. So share with me your thoughts there. What comes to mind for you when thinking about when not to ask about money history?
So not to bring up Less Lonely Money again,
bring it up, but you should.
In September, so this will air.
This airs August 28th. It's August 28th or later right now.
So the following Thursday in September, the post that I'm about to talk about will air. So it has become a thing, like as financial therapy and the psychology of financial planning collide with traditional financial planning, which again, I'm excited about, but we are mixing some cultures. And one of the things that has become pretty popular, like I hear lots of advisors say that they ask this question or talk about this question in so many ways, is tell me about your earliest money memory, or what's your earliest money memory? Or, tell me what life was like in your home as a child. I have no issue with this question. It is a great question in the sense that it is usually super interesting what people say. Absolutely. I do not think it is an appropriate question to ask within the first, let's say, 3 to 10 hours of knowing somebody. Which, if you're going through a traditional financial planning process, 10 hours. So don't ask it in intro. Don't ask it in discovery. Don't ask during plan presentation. We're going to toss in a few monitoring meetings. Okay. Maybe after we've known this person for a year or two, we've helped them with whatever they came in with, because that already has a lot of emotional charge to it. Then maybe we say, we've been planning for a while, we've got you on solid ground. I wonder if we can take a look at this plan through a different lens. And one of the things that I would like to explore is just your relationship with money more broadly, going from some financial history to some financial future. You can, and in that way, you have a solid relationship with this individual. You have established like that you have a healthy relationship and that you're safe and this is a safe place and we can talk about that kind of stuff and that we do talk about money differently here. But within those first few meetings, which is when I hear advisors are asking it, I don't think that is the appropriate time. And I can go into great detail as to why I feel that way.
So I would add on to that I hear you. And what's coming up for me as I'm listening, I'm thinking about when I was deep in the throes of doing clinical work and my very first meeting with a new client or couple, right? When they would come in, and that whole experience of coming into my waiting room and then going into the office. Yes, I had a couch and it was really pretty and there were tissues, all the stereotypical things. And I would, sit down and we exchanged, maybe a few pleasantries depending upon what their body language looked like. two. And, the first like objective was to just build rapport. And, I would know or have maybe a high level idea of what they were coming in for. It could be anywhere on the spectrum of like basic communication all the way to like extensive trauma, either within the relationship between them or just individually. Right. But my first kind of like interaction, first hour, and I'm glad that you actually quantified it into hours and not just like, hey, within the first year, because I do think the actual clock hours time spent with someone does matter. And so like those first like 53 minutes, that's how long a clinical hour is, by the way, when you go to therapy, like 53 minutes. Like it was built on like, rapport building, like what can you expect from the relationship? It was not, and generally I would say our only objective today is to feel each other out, just kind of get to know each other and get used to what it's like to talk with one another. I know that you're coming in with stuff and I'm happy to get to that. If you want to get to that right now, like we can dive into the deep end, but that's not my like goal or objective today. I just want us to get to know each other. So I'm hearing what you're saying and I'm reflecting on just kind of my own intro, meetings, and then even through like the assessment, diagnostic, treatment planning phase there too. Like, it wasn't until I spent a few hours with a person that then it was like, okay, now can we start to walk into the deep end together? And so I appreciate what you're saying and thinking about hours, right? Like making sure that the time you've spent with a client from a, if we want to just say like clock hours standpoint, right, that you've built up kind of that equity there, that relational equity before you rip a band-aid and you're like, tell me about your earliest money memory. You have no idea what a client is going to say. Maybe it was traumatic. Maybe it was traumatic. And I guess my thing is that, it's different. I want to be careful how I say this. I think that, and I'm hoping that you're going to validate me as soon as this comes out of my mouth. I think that it is different for someone like myself or you, a therapist who is trained in walking into the waters, the deepest of the deep ends, asking about maybe a client's money history, not knowing what's going to be there or even just any history. It's different for me than it is for an advisor who has no training because I know how to get us out. And I don't mean that like arrogantly, but like I know what to do like once we get there. I know what to do in order to safely like bring a client to a place of stability if need be. Advisors, unfortunately, don't. So I'm going to pause because we're talking about when not to kind of ask about money history and kind of those first like kind of clock hours. And then I very, very just kind of boldly said, if you can't walk into the waters, you don't have the skills, you shouldn't be going there. What are your thoughts?
I will 100% validate you. Because I think that that's the hardest part. And I will still tell you, it still shocks me sometimes. I've worked with clients. I teach this every year at Kansas State, at Columbia, at Maryland. And every year there'll be a student that says something, or there'll be a client that says something that I have not heard before. It gets right to your heart and it will stop your breath. Like there is always just something. And you're right. You and I have gotten training in that space. Advisors, you guys go through the CFP, which is super important. But at no point in time, do they, hey, it's a particular type of training. Like when you are going through clinical training, you are working with people, you are being watched, you are then receiving feedback after that. You are watching yourself, do these things and, practice these things. You are learning specific therapeutic techniques. And none of that exists, in getting the CFP. None of that exists even in getting a undergraduate in psychology or an undergraduate in counseling. This is master's level, at least, within therapeutic, social work, counseling, training. And I will even say for myself, my background is in industrial organizational psychology. It's not even in therapy. So I've had to get additional training in those spaces to be able to feel comfortable doing that work. It takes real practice,
clocked hours,
clocked hours, real feedback. And this is for you, let alone the client.
Yeah.
Like again, if They are there for financial planning. And cool, maybe your firm is super awesome and you happen to work with Beyond the Plan. And so maybe you talk about the fact that financial therapy is a thing and that they can talk about different stuff and we're going to ask different types of questions. It's still the day that I actually write about it in my upcoming article. I was in class. We were in class and we were talking, and one of the students, very brave student, decided to share with us about his money history. And I will never forget, not because I wasn't prepared, but because looking around the Zoom room and seeing all my other students' faces, they were not prepared. And these are master's level students. They've been doing this for a while. This is not necessarily like their first rodeo in terms of like hearing about financial therapy. And this student shares that they grew up in a home that had food scarcity. I believe it was their dad who had passed or divorced, like something happened. Dad was not there. Mom could not keep up. And so they were homeless for a little while and living, bounced around on couches, friends' house, things like this. And the student said, mostly from that time, I just remember being hungry. That room was silent.
I can imagine.
Part of it was there was just a lot of people in the room and nobody knew quite what to say.
Yeah.
But when you ask a question like that, you have to be ready for some pretty intense answers, some answers that are gut wrenching. And it can't just be like, oh, you go to tears. Tears are real.
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yes. And so this is preparing for you as the advisor, but this is also preparing for the safety of this client.
Yeah. That's such a good point. So, okay, I don't want to freak people out who are listening. Right. No. And I think that I hope, right, that like what I don't want to do is I don't want for advisors listening to this to go, okay, Meg and Ashley have now freaked me out and I'm never going to touch like this again. I don't believe that is what we are saying. I believe what we are saying is here are the things to keep in mind.
Yeah. Let's not ask that type of question early.
Correct. Or it doesn't have to even be explicitly tell me about your money history. So maybe let's talk a little bit about, let's give some hope. Oh my gosh, let's lift them up a little bit here.
Let's do our good therapy work.
Yeah.
Now, gotcha here.
Gotcha in the trenches, right? Yeah. Let's put our heads together. Let's talk a little bit about if not an advisor wants to ask about money history, how can they do that? I know we've mentioned here just like a few kind of different ways. Like I said, like, hey, where does that come from? But maybe what are some less obvious, it doesn't have to be so overt, so, kind of obvious ways that advisors can ask about money history? How can they do that?
So one of my favorite ones, because usually people tell a funny story, is tell me about your first job.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has a wackadoo first job, or like they think about it and they think like, how ridiculous. The follow-up to that, like not only will they tell you a funny story and or a story, about their life, probably through that story, you will get an indication of what their home life was like. A great follow-up question to that is, why did you get that job?
Who?
If they say, because they will, oh, well, things were tight. I just wanted to help out. Okay, now you know. If they say, I wanted a new pair of Nikes and my mom said, shove it, then now we know something different. If they say, because, I just wanted something of my own. That's interesting. Like,
yeah, there's some meaning there.
The first job, and I guess this kind of relates to why some of that early money memory stuff is really scary, is because I like, if you're going to ask money memory questions and you want to ask them early, ask them when people had about time when we had control. Like when you asked me about when I was 5, again, my student only remembered being hungry, but they couldn't work. They couldn't save anything, their world, they were completely at the will of their world. They were a child. And so when we ask people about a time in their life where they were completely helpless, and yet the whole goal of financial planning is typically to get people to feel like they can do stuff. We want to encourage these ideas of self-efficacy.
Feel empowered and have agency. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's ask questions that related to money history, but that inspire that, so that first job, like, did they get it because their mom made them? Did they get it because they wanted to help? Were they trying to buy the Nike? Whatever, like, this is usually a funny answer, and it will give you some indication of early life. I love that one.
Yeah.
Another one that I like, that's same vein of like empowerment and stuff, is, when did you start to feel like there was money that was yours to manage?
Mm.
Many people will talk about, again, a first job, but it may not be like my first job was sweeping hair at a hair salon.
That's super specific. Did you do anything else other than sweep hair? I'm sorry. Like, I kind of have to ask.
15. And so I had to have a job because I bought a car.
Mm.
And my mom was like, you're going to have this car. You have to have gas money and things like that. You have to work. So I was like, stupid. So I worked so that I could basically put gas in my car, because as you can imagine, I did not make a lot sweeping hair. But that was why I had my first job. But I don't think of that time as managing money.
Yeah.
I would actually have to go further forward in time to like my 20s, when I was out of college, working, putting money now into my 401k for the first time, that sort of thing. And yeah, like, I had an apartment. I still had a car, like, there were bills, unfortunately, and I had to pay them. And I was not great at managing money at that point in my life. Fun follow-up question. Do you enjoy managing it? Some people are like, yes, I love making budgets. Me, no. I like to spend it and never see the budget.
Yes.
That is not my thing.
Yeah.
Just anything, like, what's a decision that you remember? What's a financial decision you remember making on your own? Or what was the first financial decision you remember making on your own? Or, when you go to make, or when you have made, financial decisions in the past, what made you feel unsure? What made you feel confident? And these are great to segue into, okay, well, we're going to be working together. I want to help you to feel more confident, as we fill out that picture of like the work that we're going to be doing now. What does that look like for you? These are all related to money history. These are all probably questions that they are not expecting you to ask them, but they can totally help, especially like if those early stage relationships, you're really trying to figure out how to work together, what's the value here, learn a little bit about, the way that they think about money and stuff like that. And now you've also kind of established that asking about stuff like that is not weird. And we can build up to asking about, like a family history, like what happened 2 generations ago, or even, what was it like when you were young? What do you remember? Again, I love that question. I think that there are so many interesting things that can come from that. My first one was at church, getting the little angels off the tree during Christmas time. Mom would always have us pick one that was like the same as us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would pick like a girl that was my age. And then we'd go to the store and, get the things and put them in a box. And like, giving presents is a big thing in my family. And so it was like super fun. Mine was not traumatic, but like that's, I still see that in my life today. Like,
you're great. Yes. Super great gift giver. Yes, I can attest. Yeah. Mine was stealing lipstick from the grocery store and then having to go back and learning that you have to pay for things with money. Right. So I don't know if I would say traumatic, but certainly like the idea of consequences, there. Okay. So like this, how can advisors ask about money history? Like you've offered, shockingly, to no surprise to myself or probably most that know you, fantastic questions around how to do it. Here's something that's also, if maybe you're not quite sure about just kind of going in and asking just kind of a question. A few ways to kind of do this. One, I think naturally keeping in mind clients naturally in conversation will bring up nuggets, just little like kind of nuggets about their history. And what you can do is maybe within your CRM, like your notes, create a template for each client that has like, family money dynamics, childhood, teenage, like early adulthood. Like these are headers, right? And throughout just kind of your relationship, the interactions, like if a client just kind of mentions, like, my dad was always cheap, like you don't necessarily have to follow up on that. Like there's not a pressure, there's nothing to say, like you have
No.
to follow up with that. What you can maybe just start is like noticing and becoming aware of where those nuggets are. Put it then in that little note section around like family dynamics, like dad was cheap AF, right? And so as you're going through just kind of the relationship, you're almost building out like this living, kind of profile here for a client's money history. So I would say, like, if you're not quite so comfortable, like just directly ask, maybe just start with paying attention to where clients are mentioning history nuggets. Find some way to maybe document it and it be just kind of a living document that can be updated. The other piece too is that when clients do bring up little history nuggets, it's okay to just like, I didn't really know that about you. Could you share would you mind just sharing maybe a little bit more about that, like first, like job or dad being cheap AF, or meeting with another client, an advisor's client the other week, a woman talked about her divorce. She mentioned being like a single mom, and like the advisor wasn't quite sure if she had always been single or if she was divorced or if like the husband passed, like just was not quite sure of the context to like the history of like the relationship. And so she was talking a little bit about that. And I just kind of said, hey, like, I was a little confused and I don't do well being confused. And so would you mind, like, when you're talking about your previous partner, like, was it a marriage? Like, was it, did you divorce? Like, did they like, I know this is really personal. Like, I want to understand a little bit better. Clients usually are like, oh, yeah. And she was like, yeah, like we divorced like 10 years ago. We were together like 20 years. And, it was actually really hard because it was the first time I had to manage money by myself. And, I really struggled with like knowing how to do that. Woof. Like that's a lot of context, there might be just some natural ways, like if clients are bringing up history, to ask like just kind of some follow-up questions there without coming out the gate, and saying even like, tell me about your first job or tell me about what your 20s were like managing money. So, if you're on the fence, not feeling so comfortable, I think that there's some other ways there that you can capture that history piece.
Yeah. And I want to double click on what you did because you do this very well and it's brilliant. Is one, to state the obvious. Like you just said this. I realized it could be kind of personal. Would you mind sharing that? So you stated what they said. You acknowledge that it could be a little weird. Maybe you're feeling a little weird, whatever. And then you just said, would you mind? But as the advisor, please also know this person's already talking about it. We're not saying, hey, let's black box time, let's go. Like we're commenting on something they have already started to share. And we've asked with permission, for a little bit more context. That is a wonderful, like 3-step, hey, you just said this. Could be a little bit personal. I get it. We're just getting to know each other. Would you mind? Like that. Ashley does that all the time. It works every time. And it's not hard to do, but it is a great way to get people talking because they are there to talk and they are going to believe you that, that you believe that this is important, context matters. So yeah, I just wanted to point out like exactly what you did as I heard it. If you were doing something else, please say so.
No, that is
yeah.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. And that's some of the key here is that if you're maybe to kind of this, kind of how to ask, however it is that you decide to start to weave in money history, understanding money history around your client, make sure that you practice it first. Asking a question like, hey, like, tell me about your first job. Out the gate, that might sound like, oh, I can ask that. That's so simple. And yes, right? It might be. I also think that it is helpful to practice saying some of these things in a particular
Mhm.
way and paying attention to your tone, like your facial, and like those things do take practice. And so, however, if you decide to start to integrate financial or money history, like practice some of these questions, these
Yeah.
conversations before going
And
in and doing it.
I would think that quite a bit of the practice is, yeah, beyond just asking the first question, it's the follow up. And even,
Mm.
something that we haven't yet discussed, but we've said, but maybe not been explicit about, is that when you're asking somebody about their history, you are not there to connect the dots.
Oh yeah. Oh, now that is literally an entire other episode of like, yes, good point. Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so when we maybe you do decide to ask, tell me about your earliest money memory. Okay. And so they say whatever they're going to say. You then do not say, oh, well, you're nervous about the stock market because, yeah, your grandpa lost all of his money. Like that, we're not doing
Yeah.
that. Instead, we need to say, I'm really glad that you shared that. That's really interesting. Tell me where that we're going to play time travel again. Like, tell me where you see that in your life today. Is that something you want to continue? How does that help? How does that not help?
Mm.
Like, it is them.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know how this story that appeared in their brain, has manifested in this time. You may have your own ideas about the weird things that they have done, the reason that they are stuck, and now this is what's coming up for them. That is not what's important. What's important is how they are putting together the puzzle, and that's what we want to be curious about. And so that, to me, that's the hardest part, is staying in their story, following their story without, because the thoughts are going to come. You're going to be like, I can't believe they just said that. That is, how did they not see this? Like you're going to think those things, but you don't get to talk about that.
No. And also if you've felt a pressure to, like, hey, like you don't have to,
Yeah.
that's not your role. You don't have to. Joy Leary, who I know you know very well. Yep. She came on episode 29. So just a few episodes prior to this, and talked about storytelling. So, if you're listening and, what Meg is sharing right now around like just kind of the story and like the narrative and like connecting that, like if Joy had just some fantastic like just insights and like framework there. So go back and listen to episode 29 with Joy if you're interested, just in, when clients share something, understanding the story and what you can do there to help. All right, Meg, as we wrap things up for this episode, what else about how to ask about a client's money history do you feel like is important for maybe advisors to know, or like how to do, like, I don't really want to say what haven't we discussed, because that could lend itself to another hour, but at least for today, like top of mind, is there any other takeaways that you want to leave advisors with?
If I gave you $100 as a kid, what would you have spent it on?
Cool. Like, are you asking me? Like, I know my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine would be clothes, shoes,
Yeah,
shoes
same.
and clothes.
Same.
Yeah.
If I gave you $100 today, what would you spend it on?
Shoes and clothes.
Same.
Yeah. And debatable on which, like, so my collaboration.
Shoe size has stayed the same. Waist size, less so.
Yeah. My waist size has not. Shoe size, I've been a size 6 since sixth grade. And so that's been fantastic over the years. My collaboration gift to myself was a new pair of shoes. Yeah.
Gotta walk into the new collaborative life.
I did. I think that's a great question though.
I don't. We've talked about when to bring it up, how to bring it up. We've talked about the importance of just expectations. Like it's okay to say, especially in that first hour of meeting somebody, hey, we talk about money differently. I want to understand, not only where you're at today, but like what informed that. We will eventually get to a place where I'm asking you things about past time. So we've talked about the importance of expectation. We've talked about just different types of questions and how you can still get into money history. We've talked about different techniques for getting into money history, and or even when the client is essentially sharing money history with us and we want to sort of double tap on that, like how to go a little bit deeper without necessarily being intrusive. And I guess the last thing for me that just jumps out is like, if you're going to ask about this stuff, and then make sure it shows up in the plan.
Oh
like,
gosh.
If you're going to be presenting the plan, if you're going to be talking about a goal, don't, not that people would just ask it willy nilly, but I feel like, in the many clients, many advisors I've worked with, we're asking like hundreds of questions in discovery. And then, only certain ones are showing up in the plan. And family history is important, and it can show up in lots of different ways. And so even just as a part of your discussion, like maybe you're presenting something and you say, I remember when we were talking about, back in the day when you would go to the beach with your family, like that was such a cool memory, that stayed with you. And so as we are thinking, about your legacy and like what it's like, if you're going to ask that stuff, like, please use it.
Yeah.
Use it in your conversations with them because it makes it feel personalized. I mean, there are business benefits to doing this. But then also it doesn't, what is the point of sharing some of this really personal stuff if it's just being like, put inside a Pandora's box and like, or like Johnny, what's that guy? Like he was the sailor and he like goes down in the deep.
I don't know. What cartoons did you watch?
This was like Pirates of the Caribbean.
I don't watch that. Yeah.
Johnny Walker? No, that's alcohol.
Johnny Depp?
No.
Johnny Walker. Now I do know Johnny Walker and Jim Beam. Yeah, we're friends.
I don't remember what it is. But anyway, there's a heart. It goes down to the ocean, something like some locker. I don't know. Anyway, that. We don't want that. Don't do that. So we want to keep the stories alive. If they share them with you, share them back. Demonstrate that you were listening.
Yeah, that's where, we kind of touched on it, but like a documentation process for like money history. And so, I shared at least one way, creating some headers, maybe within your notes section to do that. But I love that you brought that up, right? Just kind of as a, hey, like if we're going to ask about it, let's also make sure that it shows up and that we're remembering there's a lot of reasons why. And so, if you don't have a documentation process for that, consider looking at just how can we capture that in a way to where the information, we make sure that it stays relevant. I know you love relevancy, right? Relevant to the relationship, not just now, but also in the future there. The last thing I would say is that if you are looking for a tool, people love tool. If you're looking for an exercise, if you email me, Ashley at beyondthefp.com. And if you comment money history tool in the subject line, I will send you my family financial pattern matrix, which captures 3 generations of money history, beliefs, impact, just some good things there. And it's a great exercise. You don't have to do it with your clients. You can actually just give it to them and have them go do it on their own there too. So if you're interested in that visual, shoot me an email, make sure the subject line says money history tool there, and we will shoot that over to you. All right, Meg, man, friend, this has been a great conversation. And sadly, it has to come to an end for at least you and I will be, go ahead. Yeah.
Force function something really quick. If you're going to send the email to Ashley, please put that thing that she said in the title, but then also send us another suggestion. If you want us to talk about something else, Johnny Walker's on the table. We can
love suggestions.
We will. So please add some submissions and we will think of other smart things to talk about.
Yeah, I love that because you and I can think of smart things to talk about, but it may not be the things that are helpful for you. So, really the purpose kind of here of planning and beyond the podcast and beyond the plan, the work that just you and I do just high level is really to make sure that whatever it is that we're putting out, that it's helpful for you. Yeah, I love that. Shoot us some suggestions there too, so that we can jump on and have an excuse to record other stuff here. So with that, I will say thank you. Thank you for allowing Meg and I into your ears and into your mind today from wherever it is that you are listening to. And, Be sure to follow us both. We've kind of listed out some things. We'll make sure that links are included in the show notes there where you can follow us. Meg's work, Less Lonely Money. You can follow Beyond the Plan. Both of us individually on LinkedIn, which is where we primarily like to hang out. And drop us a line. Let us know what's interesting to you and what you want to hear more of. And until next time, keep planning, keep growing, and keep going beyond.